My father's will was more than simply paper. It was a nuclear weapon ready to detonate and shatter our family into a million splinters. Our doom was sealed when the judge's gavel crashed like thunder in a rain-soaked Seattle courtroom. $65 million, shrouded in mystery, had severed our bonds. The betrayal of my father, William, caused my mother, Margaret, to cry. Emily, my sister, looked forward with an air of defiance, as if she had known his secrets the whole time. In my hands there was a worn picture of the Carters taken when our love, not our wealth, was what really mattered. How did we get to this point? News vans swooped down the street, their headlines screaming, "Seattle Tycoon's Fortune Sparks Family War." It all began with a single meeting, a single document, and the revelation of a reality for which none of us were prepared. As if Seattle were in mourning for my father, William Carter, the rain pounded on the glass walls of our Lake Washington estate. He passed away in the middle of the night from a heart attack, leaving 52 behind. James' mom, Emily, and Dad were all smiling as if nothing could ever hurt us as we sat on the chilly, slick leather couch in the living room and stared at a picture of us hiking in the Cascades. Prior to the will that occurred, just in time for the bomb that would destroy everything. Sitting across from me, Mom. Margaret twisted a tissue into knots with her hands. Her once laughing, bright hazel eyes were now filled with sadness as she turned 48. With her black hair put into a tight bun and her sharp jaw set, my 26-year-old sister Emily sat on the edge of the sofa, developing her digital business with an ardor that Dad appreciated. She had always been the one who was driven. I believed I was Dad's rock, a software engineer in my 30s, solid, pragmatic. We were all here today to listen to his last remarks given by our family lawyer, Thomas Reed. The subdued tones of the estate stood in stark contrast to Thomas's gray suit as he entered. A leather folder rested on his shoulder as he bore a look that betrayed more than just pity. As he lowered his voice to warn James, Margaret, and Emily, "This won't be easy." I felt my stomach knot up as he opened the packet and revealed Dad's will. My dad avoided the limelight since he was an introverted tech investor. In anticipation of my eventual takeover of his little company, I had anticipated inheriting a modest inheritance. There was an error on my part, very improper. William left an estate valued at $75 million. Thomas added his words, striking a chord. The tissue dropped on the floor as Mom gasped. Emily remained still, her eerie composure belying any signs of anxiety. Is it 75 million? Who would have thought that Dad, the flannel-shirted man who drove a battered Subaru, had stashed a fortune? Investments are the source, Thomas said. Unsaid holdings in real estate, offshore accounts, and Silicon Valley firms. He maintained its secrecy. Covert, perhaps. What a lovely way to put it. Deceitful. Something was racing through my head. Were they able to build this business with all of those late hours Dad spent working and those travels he never explained? Why not tell us? Even Mom, who had supported him for 25 years, would know. She was pale and her lips quivered as I stared at her. The amount was $75 million, she muttered, and he kept it a secret from me. Thomas raised his spectacles to his eyes and cleared his throat. Upon reading the provisions of the will, he thought, "There's more." The pain intensified with each word. Mom received a meager $5 million, which was tied up in limitations, while Emily and I were to share 80% or $60 million. According to a codicil, the other $10 million were to be used for an unspecified philanthropic institution. Was it a codification? When did Dad become concerned in helping others? The man who taught me to code when I was 11 years old and who we joked over burgers at Dick's Drive-In wasn't this guy. Standing up, Mom's chair scuffed the wooden floor. "This is an error," she said, her voice quivering. "I don't think William would do this. He would never ignore me. The betrayal she felt toward Dad and the life she had imagined they had shared was palpable in her eyes. But Emily pushed in closer, her voice unwavering. "Father had his reasons, Mom. Should we put our faith in him?" There was a smack in her composure that suggested she knew more than she said. Did her father confide with her? The idea hurt. "Emily, tell me how you can say that," I inquired, my tone being more abrupt than intended. "Something is amiss here. Was Dad secretive? I don't think so." Flashes of memory, his shuttered office, muted phone conversations resurfaced. Stress, not living a double life, was what I had ascribed to it. Unflinching, Emily locked eyes with me. "He was trying to keep us safe, James. You'll see. Safeguarding us. Or may they be manipulating us?" Desperation sounded in Mom's voice as she turned to Thomas. "Is it permissible to do this? Are we up against it?" As Thomas traced the margins of the will with his fingertips, he moaned, "Margaret, it's binding, but you have the option to challenge it. There are perspectives on mental capability and improper influence. There's a lot of work ahead of us." Mom agreed, her expression becoming more stubborn. Then we get into a brawl. There were a lot of unsaid charges in the air as Thomas stuffed his folder, and the room seemed smaller as a result. Mom's faith in Dad was swept away by the tidal wave of her sadness. The wall that was Emily's composure kept us out. What about me? I felt trapped, stuck between the sorrow of Mom and the father I had imagined. "Father, why? In what ways is this being concealed? Because what's the point in dividing us?" Mom walked the mansion that night, already plotting her case, while the rain pounded on the windows. Instead of continuing the fight, Emily went to her room and remained silent. Storm clouds obscured Seattle's skyline as I stood at the window. The will was more than just legalese. It served as a schism in our family. What I didn't anticipate was the extent of the crack. Consistent rainfall mirrored the impending storm at our Lake Washington estate. Mother Margaret, her eyes red from anger and grief, hadn't slept. In her quest to uncover her father's secret $75 million inheritance, she had spent the night sifting through ancient bank records. "He lied to me, James," she added, her voice rough as she held a chilly cup of coffee. I wanted to reassure her, but I was unable to do so because I had my own reservations about Dad William Carter, the guy I had assumed I knew. As if the revelation of the will were any other Tuesday, my sister Emily had already departed for the Pioneer Square headquarters of her company. We arrived to Thomas Reed's downtown Seattle law practice before midday, with the Space Needle standing as a silent judge through the window. In sharp contrast to the mayhem, we introduced Thomas's workplace was a haven of polished wood and leather. As if prepared to battle, Mom sat stiffly with her fists clenched. As my software engineer mind raced to find a solution to this chaotic situation, I slumped into a chair. Emily was a little tardy, but her fitted blazer exuded self-assurance. However, her tightly pursed lips revealed guilt, a body of knowledge. Neither could I tell. Thomas said, his voice unwavering. "Margaret, challenging the will is feasible, but it's a war." Desperate Mom leaned forward to gather proof that William was either manipulated or not in his right mind. "Thomas, he wasn't acting normally. He was cold and reclusive in his last years. He is not responsible for this codicil, this riches." I was also bothered by the $20 million codicil, which was meant for an unnamed foundation. Charity was never brought up by Dad, and he never even gave money to the PTA. Why now? As he made notes, Thomas nodded. "His mental health and financial affairs will be investigated." Mom's eyes widened when she heard the news that I had engaged forensic accountants to track down the assets, which included Silicon Valley businesses, offshore accounts, Bellevue houses, and Bainbridge Island. "Real estate. We were hardly making a profit," he informed me. The treachery sliced through her words like a knife. Dad had secretly amassed an empire over their 25 years of marriage. Keeping her calm, Emily finally spoke out. "Mom, Dad was quite sure of himself. His vision is the will and the basis. We ought to respect it. Respect it." Something about her remarks set Mom off. "Emily, what is honor?" Mom stood up and snapped. "A guy who demoted me, who gave James and you millions while I get nothing." Emily remained unfazed. "We are the ones he wanted to continue his work. Perhaps he felt you were incapable of dealing with it." Everywhere there was a cessation of movement. Emily, my sister, the one with whom I had confided since I was a little girl, started back at me. "Emily, that's enough," I said with an edge to my voice. "Mom is in pain. Isn't it obvious to you?" Emily fixed her unwavering gaze on me. "I am not your adversary, James, for reasons that Dad had. You will comprehend in due course." Comprehend what? Her enigmatic silence irritated me because it may have revealed secrets that she had discussed with Dad that I had no knowledge of. As usual, Thomas gestured for calm. "Stay focused. Margaret, before we file the contest, we need to discuss strategy, including depositions and witnesses." Mom nodded, but her expression was one of pain and mistrust as she kept her attention fixed on Emily. In the midst of Mom's suffering and Emily's rebellion, I felt like a rope caught in a tug of war. Something has to be done. I propose that we meet at my house tonight. A few of us know attorneys. Even though Mom was hesitant, she eventually decided that us two needed to talk. Non-committal. Emily shrugged. Later that night, I made my way to the house, with the Seattle city gradually disappearing from view. In my pursuit of information, I contacted Laura Bennett, who had been Dad's former business partner. She spoke in a sharp, reserved tone. "The money wasn't even an issue in the codicil, James. Learning selflessness to build something bigger than yourselves was William's wish for all of you. Oh, Dad, you missed my high school graduation because of a meeting." She hung up on me when I pushed her, so now I have even more questions. The dinner was a total bust. Once a place of joy and celebration, the mansion's dining room was now the scene of bloodshed. With her voice rising, Mom accused Emily of conspiring with Dad. "You were aware of the financial aspect, weren't you?" Emily's fork made a clattering sound. "Mom, I knew he had grand plans, but this was completely unexpected. I was entrusted with the responsibility of carrying out his wishes." "About what?" They spoke like blades slashing through any possibility of calm, and I attempted to intervene. "Cease and desist." My fist slammed into the table as I yelled. "None of us is an enemy. We are family." Even unpleasant than the shouting was the subsequent quiet. Taking hold of her coat, Emily muttered something about work as Mom rushed out. Shadows created by the chandelier's light resembled fissures in our connection as I sat alone. Laura's words resounded abandonment of self and legacy. Did Dad want to see how we would manage? If not, had he completely misunderstood us? As the battle had barely started, I braced myself for what I thought would be the worst. On my way to the King County courts, the sky above Seattle looked like a bruise from all the rain that had fallen. A rift in our family that had begun in the seclusion of our Lake Washington estate had burst out, exposing us to the raw, bleeding reality of our situation. Margaret, my mother, sat down next to me, her hands shaking as she clung to a scarf, as if it might protect her from seeing the reality. My sister Emily was already there, her jacket adorned with the shiny emblem of her firm, her expression one of determination. We were no longer family, and now the whole world was staring at us because of the will, which was Dad's $75 million treachery. There was a flurry of activity within the courtroom as reporters scrawled notes and vultures-like gazes fixed on us. The $75 million that tech investor Swarnington liar William Carter had stashed away wasn't the only thing that enticed them. A scandal had broken out. Something had been taped, leaked, and splattered on X from last night's dinner, that yelling fight in our dining room. They dubbed it the Carter Clash, and it went viral. Mom's accusation of Emily's involvement in the plot, her voice quivering with anger as she said, "You knew Emily. He was involved in your plot." Emily's emotionless response, "He trusted me, Mom," played relentlessly, becoming the newest fascination in Seattle. Tech fortune tears family apart, news trucks parked outside our mansion. No amount of reasoning from my software engineer could have stopped this mayhem. I felt physically ill just thinking about it. And who was responsible for its leak? Someone close by. Something like a compromised phone. None of it mattered. Everyone could see our anguish and sorrow. Confined. Mom averted her gaze from my, as if challenging everyone to evaluate her. Emily straightened her back. With a quiet voice, our lawyer Thomas Reed leaned in. "Keep your cool, James. However, the tabloids were triumphing and transforming our life into a farce, even though the court is concerned with testimony and not with them." Parents were contacted first by the judge. The elegance of her school teacher crumbled as she stepped up to the platform. "William changed," she murmured, her voice quivering. "He became more reclusive and isolated himself in his workplace. I thought it was stress, not millions," she said, describing how her husband's secret empire, startups, offshore accounts, and properties she had no knowledge of had ruined their marriage and their 25 years of shared ambitions. "He sidelined me," she muttered, her voice quivering with emotion. "Why?" There was complete stillness as we all felt the burden of her suffering. I wished I could put things right by embracing her, but I felt just as lost. Emily followed suit, her stride deliberate and her voice unwavering. "Dad wasn't trying to harm us," she said, fixing her gaze on the judge. "He created that money to guarantee our future and to put us to the test. His struggle in overcoming his avarice is the will and the codicil." The things she said pierced Mom's heart and twisted her wounds. Adding, "He trusted me to carry his vision." Emily glanced at me, alone, ignoring Mom, beloved by her. "Where do we stand?" The reporters ate up her rebellion as they typed faster. Once again, Mom's face contorted in betrayal. I stood up, my jaw clenched. I expressed it honestly and rawly. "I don't know why Dad did this. To dream big and learn to code, he was my idol." My gaze shifted to Mom, and then Emily, as I realized that this was driving a wedge between us. There need to be some significance to the codicil and the basis. That and each other must be respected, right? I pleaded with my voice, and it cracked. Unity was irrelevant to the media, even if the court nodded. They were seeking blood. An ex-business associate of Dad's, Laura Bennett, then took the stand. The place was scrutinized by her keen eyes. "William was afraid his fortune would destroy you," she said. "That $20 million foundation, the codicil, was his method of teaching you to be selfless, to make you see beyond money. Merely selfless, who among my deals missed my games? Dad." Her harsh statements painted a picture of a guy I hardly knew. After hearing Mom mumble, "He didn't trust me," Emily's jaw clenched as if Laura validated her views. In the midst of Mom's suffering, I saw a glimmer of optimism. Perhaps the basis was Dad's atonement. Paparazzi flocked outside asking incessant questions. "Is the money something you are aware of, Margaret? Emily, do you have any more secrets to hide?" My mom's cries were muffled by my cloak as I sheltered her. With a confident stride, Emily continued on, but her expression showed her anxiety. We were vulnerable to drones, cameras, and eyes peering through the mansion's glass walls. I discovered Mom engrossed in old photographs that night, while Emily remained confined to her room. Our spirits were laid naked in the trial, but the world's eyes were much more intense. Dad's will was more than a boundary. It was a raging inferno, and we were on fire. Our family's internal storm continued unabated, even though the rain in Seattle had subsided to a drizzle. Every look between Mom Emily and me carried unsaid accusations, turning the once sanctuary Lake Washington house into a pressure cooker. As my mother Margaret sat at the kitchen island, she drew notes on a legal pad to help her dispute Dad's will. The future of my sister Emily's business was in jeopardy due to our public incident, and she hid out in her room. As a software engineer who was completely unprepared, James stood in the center attempting to write code that would solve the problem of a family's disintegration. Our last option for achieving peace was Thomas Reed's downtown law practice. He pretended to be impartial from his office, which overlooked Puget Sound, but he knew it was an illusion. With a fierce determination that belied her former demeanor as a schoolteacher, Mom entered the room. "I want half," she responded with a harsh tone in her voice. "William owed me that for 25 years, Emily said, her jacket sharp and her eyes icy. Emmy followed suit. "You may read Dad's will, Mom. He is disrespected if we fight it." I scowled. Her remarks fueled Mom's anger. Thomas, as composed as ever, extended his hands. "Let's see if mediation helps. The emotional and financial toll of going to trial is substantial." He offered 3 alternatives: divide the $75 million, equally divide the $20 million foundation money from the codicil, or reach a settlement outside of court. After seeing a glimpse of Dad's motivation, which Laura had described as selflessness, I clung to the concept of the foundation. I proposed we split the foundation's funds in half. I proposed full of optimism. We would still pay tribute to Dad, but Mom receives more. Mom's expression became more precise. "That won't cut it, James." He turned on me. Emily gave a disapproving look. "Dad would have been proud. You are altering his lasting impact." Sounds of crackling filled the room. Mam stood up and paced. "You seem to know what he's thinking, Emily." Embraced it or not, Emily's countenance became more angular. "All he confided in me about his vision, Mom, but he didn't confide in her about his secrets. In the leaked recording that is still consuming X, Mom's allegations reverberated. "You plotted with him." The words hurt. Our lives had become a Seattle soap drama. Talk shows analyzed our confrontations. Investors pulled their money out of Emily's business, and neighbors whispered. When Mom went by, the Carter clash was all over. We were enveloped in a cloud of public disgrace. Under my breath, I gave it another go. Here we value family. Are we unable to reach a compromise? However, the concept of a middle ground was an illusion. Mom sought redress for a marriage she had come to believe was an illusion. Pursuant to her goal, Emily sought to establish her rightful place as Dad's successor. With the words, "It's not about money, it's about right," Mom rejected Thomas's proposal for a 40-30-30 split, and Emily stormed out screaming, "This is pointless." Mediation broke down with each session inflicting more pain. The photographers were relentless in their pursuit of our house, capturing every emotion, Mom's sobs and Emily's scowl, as the scandal shone brightly. I slouched on Thomas's office chair as we were alone. "Our relationship is deteriorating," I said, my voice quivering, his composure leaking out in a sigh. "James going to court could end up costing you more than just money," he said. "What would we lose? The link between us. Is this a joke?" My mind wandered to my dad and his secrets, his subtle grin. Had he anticipated this with his $75 million? The gloomy, merciless skyline of the city loomed as I departed. I was afraid of the consequences we would face after the court made its decision. The towering windows of the King County Courthouse framed a Seattle sky that was still drenched with rain, and the air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and stress. James Carter here, clutching my hands and feeling my pulse beat like a drum as I sat between Mom and Emily. With a mix of sadness and determination visible on her face, my mother Margaret fixed her gaze on the judge as she clutched her scarf tightly in her lap. My sister Emily sat stiffly, her startup logo pin shining in the light as she seemed to control the result with her gaze. The reporters in the back nervously tapped away at their notebooks, eagerly awaiting the next turn in the Carter clash. Here we were at the moment when an unfamiliar man in a black robe would determine the destiny of our family, all because of Dad's will, $75 million worth of secrets. It all started with the judge, a formidable lady with steely eyes and a commanding voice. This case is a tragedy not just of wealth, but of trust. Her comments pierced to the core, summing all the things we had lost. Emily's vehement support of Dad's vision, Mom's tear-stained evidence of his concealment, and my frantic appeal for unity. She had heard it all. Laura Bennett had sworn that her $20 million foundation was Dad's attempt at atonement in the codicil, and she was aware of this. Our cries from the dining room became Seattle's sensation when she heard the recording that went viral. As we all waited, she raised the gavel. With her words, "The will, as written, is legally sound." Emily felt a little relief in her shoulders as she grasped mine, Mom's breath caught in her throat. Justice requires a change, the judge said, and my heart was pounding. Adjustment, she spelled out the decision with every syllable, having the power to change our destiny. The $30 million would go to Mom as a token of appreciation for everything she did for William Carter during the last 25 years. While Emily and I were each given 25%, $18.75 million, it was not quite as much as Dad had hoped for, but it was much than enough to ensure our futures. With my appointment as trustee, and the reduction of the codicil's $20 million bequest to $7.5 million for the foundation, I am charged with realizing Dad's desire. Last but not least, family therapy to fix the problems caused by money. Mom let out a sigh, her expression a mix of relief and weariness. Emily's jaw clenched, and her stillness said volumes. Being a trustee was a burden, a link to my father's legacy that I wasn't sure I wanted. With cries of, "Margaret, is this justice?" the reporters rushed forward demanding answers. "James, are you going to respect the foundation?" Despite the mayhem, Thomas Reed escorted us to safety by waving his arm. The flashes of the paparazzi encircled the area outside. Emily walked with a limp gait. Mom's cries were gentle, and all I wanted to do was vanish. We escaped to our mountain cottage in the Cascades, a rustic haven nestled amid pine trees away from the relentless light of Seattle. The cool air carried a heavy weight of quiet. We stood face to face inside, in front of a roaring fire, without attorneys or cameras. Only the three of us, human, raw and shattered. Mom was the first to speak, and her voice quivered. "Your loss of identity is the reason I fought James. William's secrets caused her to doubt everything." Her red, tear-stained eyes pleaded for comprehension. Her stubbornness eroding Emily adjusted. "I went to Dad's defense to show that I was enough," she muttered. "He had faith in me, but now I'm terrified I let him down." Her honesty was shocking to me. "Is Emily afraid?" It was unknown to me. Shaky-voiced, I paused to inhale. Once again, all I wanted was for us to be a family. "I failed you both." The words sliced through me, exposing my shame. As if swallowing our confessions, the walls of the cottage embraced us. A trembling bridge, Mom extended her hand for Emily's. Emily remained steadfast. My father's calm strength and imperfections sprang to mind. Had he been aware that this decision would compel us to meet? Or had he failed to account for the expense? There was no triumph in the ruling. Rather, it served as a reflection of our differences. Even with Mom's $30 million, her pain would remain. No amount of Emily's share could allay her fears. No longer did I see my position as trustee as an honor. Rather, it felt like an obligation. I caught a glimmer of optimism as we sat in the firelight, its warmth illuminating not only our surroundings, but also our potential for a new beginning. Our narrative was far from ended, even if the court had spoken. There was no more terrifying sight than the realization that our fate now rested on our shoulders than the sound of a gavel falling. Although the summer sun peeked through the clouds and illuminated our Lake Washington estate, the warmth was insufficient to dispel the icy air that separated us. Mother Margaret remained still in the kitchen as she ceased to tangle legal pads and scarves. After her long legal battle over Dad's $75 million fortune was finally resolved, new divisions emerged in our family. $30 million went to Mom, $18.5 million to Emily and James, and $7.5 million to a foundation I was appointed to head. A lifeline we sorely needed. The court had ordered therapy. I worried that no amount of money could ever mend the profound wounds that separated us. In Dr. Rachel Nguyen's Seattle therapy office, a warm and welcoming place with wood flooring and an Elliott Bay vista, we met. I felt like I was being led through a tempest by Rachel, with her steady voice and serene gaze. "The will isn't relevant here," she said as she placed 3 notebooks on the table. "In the end, it matters how you treat one other. Let's begin there." Mom sat rigidly, her sadness weighing her down. My sister Emily crossed her arms as the weight of the judgment cooled the enthusiasm for her venture. As if weighed down by a rock, the trustee duty caused me to slump. "Do you think we could start over? Or was it the irretrievable loss of our family portrait, which captures laughing in cascade hikes? For our writing needs, Rachel distributed writing implements. "Penned a letter to William," she advised. "Say what you couldn't when he was here." Mom said, her pen dead and her breath caught in her throat. "I am at a loss as to how to begin," she murmured. Smiling softly, Rachel smiled. "Begin with the truth." Mom wrote her words, a torrent of love and treachery, her tears smearing the ink. She read loudly, her voice quivering. "William, you shattered my heart. You kept everything hidden for 25 years. She was so vulnerable, and it reminded me of the lady who had bandaged my knees, now hurting herself. I loved you, but I'm lost." Next up was Emily, whose voice was the softest I had ever heard. "Dad, I fought for your vision because I wanted to make you proud," she replied, her eyes down. "Yeah, but I'm worried that I won't amount to enough." Emily, the courageous businesswoman, was losing it, her rebellion hiding her insecurities. As my thoughts raced, I clenched my notepad. Reading it with a constricted throat, I read, "Dad, I admired you, tore us apart however your secrets. Our shared facts hung heavily over Puget Sound, and while I'm furious, I miss you." Rachel silently nodded, allowing us a moment to collect ourselves. Even after treatment ended, the Carter clash was still there. Though the initial excitement had died down, X still played the viral tape, which included Mom's allegations and Emily's icy responses. Emily's pitch sessions were tense since her business was met with dubious investors. The pain of the neighbors' whispers made Mom avoid them. The glass walls of the house provided little protection from the photographers, even when I protected them. I decided to host a family meal one night in an effort to clean up our dining room after it had been used as a battleground. A sliver of hope for brighter times floated in the air as Mom prepared Dad's beloved lasagna. With her jacket replaced with a sweater, Emily came with a hint of hesitation. In the stillness, we dined, the clanging of silverware audible. "Do you recall Dad's awful puns?" I said, just to see what would happen. There was a quiver in Mom's mouth. The word "awful" escaped her lips as a little giggle crept into her voice. Emily got in on the act, riffing off of my coding days. Bite me joke that my dad used to make us all moan. The room was filled with cautious but genuine laughter, a glimpse of our former selves. At this point in time, it was not mending, but it was progress. Rachel looked into their eyes and said, "Who are we if we don't have any money?" Actually, I was curious to find out, but I had no idea. I reconnected with Laura Bennett, Dad's former business colleague, to coordinate the foundation's launch when I was appointed trustee. She spoke with conviction as she leaned in over coffee on Capitol Hill. William was hoping for an effect, James. Impact a legacy that goes beyond money. One way to commemorate Dad without disclosing his secrets. The thought sparked a fire in me. I dreamed of a community center in Rainier Valley, the neglected core of Seattle, where youngsters like me could come to code our aspirations into reality. I nervously presented it to Mom and Emily. Something changed in Mom's expression. "William should have done it openly," she said. As Emily's first genuine agreement, she nodded. "It's ours to do." Rachel pushed us on and she asked us to each share a single family-related hope. Emily's was honest and raw, to be seen, not judged. Mom's was straightforward, trust again. My appeal was to remain together. Every phrase was a brick, helping us to restore what we had lost. Thanks to the mansion's glass walls, which reflected potential, it seemed less like a prison. There was no easy way to recover, but we were making progress toward a better future, although a difficult one. We were shattered by Dad's will, but maybe we could build something more lasting than his secrets. With the Cascades adorned in red and gold by the Seattle Fall, our family stood on the brink of something new against this background of regeneration. Despite its somber history, the home on Lake Washington buzzed with a sense of tranquil optimism. Margaret, Mom, found solace in smiling more as her sadness faded like the morning mist that envelops Puget Sound. My sister Emily's company was bouncing back, and her barriers were crumbling as she carried herself with a lighter load. My father's $7.5 million foundation was both a burden and a light for me, James Carter. Now that the court had handed down its verdict, $30 million for Mom and $18.75 million for Emily and me, a new chapter had begun with the mandatory therapy sessions with Dr. Rachel Nguyen. Attempts were being made, but we were not yet complete. In Rainier Valley, the pulsing heart of Seattle, where aspirations often battled to breathe, the William Carter Community Center was inaugurated today. As a heartfelt tribute to Dad's passion of contemporary architecture, the building's glass front shone. But its true goal was to serve as a center where children could learn to code, create, and find hope. With my trusteeship transformed from a chain to a key, I took my place at the platform. At being at my side, Mom and Emily made a solemn promise to start again. With their phones out, the crowd, including local officials, families, and even a few reporters, watched. But this time we got to tell the tale. William Carter believed in impact, I said, my voice booming across the room with a steady assurance. We will carry on his legacy via this facility. A place where kids can build futures, not walls, I thought, as I stole a quick peek at Mom's radiant gaze and Emily's subtle but undeniable nod. Recasting the Carter clash as a chance for atonement, local TV cameras captured the moment the ribbon was cut and the jubilation erupted. For once, being in the limelight felt appropriate as a headline on X read, "Seattle family turns feud into hope." We then strolled into the center's hallways, where children were already playing with computers, a sound that would have delighted Dad, resting her fingertips on a plaque that said, William Carter Foundation. Mom touched it. "James, he would be proud," she whispered, adding, "This is what he meant." Emily, who is normally so reserved, loosened up. I felt a pain when I saw my dad in my mind, his calm grin, his imperfections, and his secrets, and something more. It was his desire, so why keep it a secret? The inquiry remained, but it had lost its sting. As a new ritual to rediscover our origins, we embarked on a hiking trip to the Cascades. As the path meandered among the woods, the earthy, nostalgic air clung to the senses. After months of walking with a limp, Mom took the lead. When Emily stumbled and let me catch her, she giggled, since she was wearing shoes instead of her normal heels. "Thanks, big brother," she said, and I suddenly heard my long-lost sister. We paused at a viewpoint with Mount Rainier in the background and spoke about Dad's life, including his disgusting camping coffee, his joy at seeing me develop my first app, and his unwavering belief in Emily's visions. Only love, unfiltered, and real, is discussed. Sitting on a log at the end of the route, we watched the sun set. A strong "let's keep this" came from Mom. No secrets, monthly hikes and dinners. Emily nodded as we locked gazes. "Handle it. No longer will I hide." The tension in my chest began to ease. Though we didn't look anything like the Cascade family in that vintage picture, we were creating something fresh, powerful, and grounded in reality. With a bow to Dad, we returned to the mansion for supper, where the lasagna was sizzling. We discussed the future of the center over wine, and made plans for coding camps, art programs, and scholarships. After Emily proposed a business incubator, she retaliated. My mom suggested a garden for peace. I recognized Dad's codicil in its selflessness and significance, and I realized we were paying tribute to his wish as much as his money. What we had learned from Dr. Rachel resounded in my mind, and I reflected on the eternal principles we had covered. Trust is built through transparency. Our struggle began with Dad's secrets. It ended with open hearts. Truth, no matter how painful, brings people closer. I know this from personal experience. Wealth isn't happiness. Love, not $75 million, was the glue that held our marriage together. In my experience, the pursuit of material wealth causes one to lose sight of the things that really matter in life. Meaningful connections and purpose. Counseling helped us let go and recognize the suffering of others, which is a necessary step toward healing. Forgiveness, I've realized, frees you from the shackles of resentment. We gained a sense of purpose and a legacy that goes beyond financial gains via our work at the center. Knowing that my contributions, no matter how modest, have an impact has brought me great delight. With a promise in the clink of a glass, we lifted them high. "To us," Mom answered with a genuine grin. There was a shimmer in Emily's eyes as she said, "And to never losing this again." I could feel Dad's presence, not as a shadow, but as light. As a broken but united family, our reflections mirrored in the mansion's glass walls. Trust, love, and a foundation that would last beyond us had helped us rebuild after the will had tried and damaged us. I finally felt unafraid of what was ahead as our legacy began to take shape.